And at number 10, uphill battle for Johnny Depp. According to Dr. Jill Huntley-Taylor, a legal analyst and the CEO of Taylor Trial Consulting, there are many challenges in this case. The first is determining what is the truth. Jurors must be convinced whether Depp was physical with Heard or not. Quote, if jurors conclude that this was a mutually abusive relationship, some may see her op-ed as technically correct. However, other jurors may believe what Heard wrote was only a half-truth and therefore deceptive. The other challenge is the Washington Post op-ed. Not only does Johnny have to prove her accounts were not true, he also needs to prove a certain amount of malice on her part. Taylor continued, quote, the testimony that she initially wanted his name included in the op-ed may suggest malice, but the timing prior to her movie release may also suggest her real motive was to benefit herself. She assumes that jurors will conclude there was physical violence on both sides of the marriage. Taylor also believes the Me Too movement will benefit Heard, as women are more inclined to be believed over men. Taylor also predicted that Heard's lawyers would attempt to discredit every story from Depp by highlighting his substance addictions and out-of-control lifestyle. Taylor concluded, quote, this is a case of a toxic relationship and no one is coming out of it unscathed, regardless of whether money changes hands. But Depp's charisma might help him slightly. And at number 9, mutual violence the most likely conclusion. This case is a whole lot of he said, she said, and in the end it comes down to whether one or both parties put hands on each other. Dr. Darcy Sterling, a relationship therapist and clinical social worker, told Entertainment Weekly that she believes mutual abuse will be the likely answer for the jury, continuing that if a person only used physicality to defend themselves, the term should not be used, but she stated that this type of behavior is generally shown by both partners. Sterling adds, quote, both partners were egregious in their behaviors, and neither seems to realize their culpability. Things are always easier to make sense of when one person is clearly a victim and the other is a perpetrator. Adding, quote, in my 27 years of practicing as a therapist, the vast majority of relationships I've seen show problems in both partners. And at number 8, both in the wrong. Attorney John Katz has a direct view of the Fairfax County Courthouse in Virginia from his office, and he's watching the proceedings closely, not only for entertainment as he claims it's the biggest case he's seen in the last 20 years, but for any legal precedent that might come of the decision. Katz does mainly free speech work, so he's interested to see how far Amber Heard's claims will be protected by free speech, although he believes that no party will be the clear winner. When speaking about the case, Katz said, quote, I want a verdict against both of them. Next up, Johnny Depp hand movements. One body language expert noted that Depp might have been deceptive during his testimony about hurting his finger. When he was on the stand to testify about when he allegedly put his hand through a wall out of anger, Depp denied this and told a different version of events, claiming his finger was hurt after Heard threw a bottle at him. However, the body language expert notes that the large pauses he had while telling the story is concerning and might signify that he is trying to piece together a story rather than the truth. Although it's normal to be careful with words during a trial, the expert noted deceptive behavior and a quote, condescending smirk, face touching, and grooming by running his hand through his hair. He also frequently blocked his mouth. This all contributed to him being a quote, charming storyteller. He also injected emotion into his retelling of events to connect to his audience even more. The expert believes that Depp 100% punched a wall, but that he told the truth when he didn't sustain his finger injury at the time. And at number 6, will have minimal impact on media outlets. Attorney Jack Browning from Davis Wright Tremaine LLP, who represents media clients including the New York Post and Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, says he's not worried about this verdict making any significant change for his media clients. He believes the case is a one-off and is unique to the industry. He continued, quote, will this case be broadly applicable to clients in the media? It's not obvious that it will. Browning states the case is more to do with the Me Too movement and spousal battery than the media. In short, the couple is relitigating their divorce in public. Quote, this lawsuit was brought for Johnny to win the court of public opinion. He's using the courts as a platform to have his side heard. But there's a strong consensus that neither side will come out of this unscathed. Amber touches her face. While Amber was listening to an audio recording in court, the body language expert observed that Amber touched her face a lot. The expert told viewers that when anyone's levels of stress and anxiety are increased, one of the ways our body deals with it is by touching our face. Continuing, quote, it's like recharging your cell phone. It does a cognitive reset, and it does an emotional reset. Amber specifically touched her face on her forehead, which is significant to the body language expert. Touching the forehead is an indicator of shame, and since the audio recording was making Amber look bad, it makes sense she would feel shame. Even though Amber touched her face quite a bit, the expert noted that Amber never showed any quote, microaggressions of sadness throughout her eyebrows or corners of her lip, as one would expect in a trial like this. When the expert was asked about the audio recordings, Driver said the recordings should be thrown out of court, adding, quote, of course she's going to be whistling Dixie saying good things in these audio recordings, most of them. Who knows, she could be acting, This does not prove she is a battered woman, like the article said in the Washington Post. In at number 4, public relations nightmare. Daniel Gutenplan, an entertainment litigator, defamation expert and partner at Eisenstein Fam & Glass, told People his thoughts on the trial, saying that at this point, the trial has much less to do with the law than image, and it spiraled into a PR battle, saying, quote, "There's been a lot of dirty laundry aired in public. Clearly Johnny feels he has very little left to lose, and he has no problem publishing to the world at large, frankly, his innermost secrets, and those of Ms. Heard." Gutenplan also pointed out some flaws in Depp's case, asking why he's apologizing to Ms. Heard if he did nothing wrong. He also finds it unfavorable that he's not able to look at Ms. Heard in court, and avoids eye contact at all costs. About the competing mid-trial statements, Gutenplan says that, quote, "Both camps are trying to control the narrative as best they can." Gutenplan also shared why he believes Heard has the upper hand. Quote, "Johnny is the plaintiff, so he needs to prove that there was no harm done whatsoever. Heard just needs to establish in theory that she was abused, which is much easier." Heard has defensive body language. During the trial, the body language expert noticed that Heard seemed very aggressive, which is interesting because it's not normally an emotion that would be seen in a domestic harm case. At one point, Heard started to aggressively scratch her shoulders so fast that she almost knocked off her microphone. When Heard's lawyers objected to some questions, Heard started looking down, showing that she was thinking of what to say next. Heard then danced around Depp's questioning, using a technique called speech disfluency. She stumbled over her words and also used fluff words like to stall time, and to think about what to say next. The expert also noted that when answering some questions, it seemed like she had rehearsed what to say. Since she's an actress, that makes a lot of sense. The expert noted she looked like she had, quote, "forgotten her lines." And at number 2, Depp's side is concerned about the gap. LA jury consultant Richard Gabriel agreed with the above statements that this break gives Heard's side of things a huge advantage, saying about the gap, quote, "What we hear last really does stick with us. Instead of moving on to something else like another witness and focusing on that, jurors will sit for more than a week with Heard's testimony. It's a common practice in trial to always have the advantage of speaking before breaks, and commonly lawyers will pace the trial to ensure that they win some sort of battle before an afternoon coffee break, weekend adjournment, or week-long gap. Leaving jurors with a feeling that your side won that portion of the day is powerful when it comes down to deliberation." Continuing, quote, "It's not a wash, it does favor her. Timing of trials is very important. When you introduce things, who gets to go last, who speaks before a weekend, all that stuff matters." Even worse, Depp's team was gaining so much momentum against her in the beginning, and over time the jury will forget those initial feelings in his favor. And finally at number 1, Heard's emotional testimony may sway critics. Since we listened to Depp's side of things in the beginning of the trial, the internet was on his side, clearly believing what he had to say. But after Heard finally took the witness stand, something that was not guaranteed, some of her critics might have started to soften. Depp was on the stand for 4 days, accusing Heard of being the aggressor in their relationship. Then before the break, we heard 2 days of Amber telling her side of the story, explaining how they were deeply in love, but because of Johnny's issues with anger and substance misuse, he spiraled out of control and became violent. Depending on how she's able to stick to her story during the cross-examination, she could put some serious doubts in the minds of the jury that Johnny was physical at some point during their relationship, even if they believe Heard was the instigator. Southern California civil attorney Ryan Baker said, quote, "Her testimony was quite compelling. Even if you're not a fan of Amber Heard and you're biased towards Johnny Depp, she has presented some fairly detailed, emotional, strong testimony. It's hard to imagine that testimony won't be bouncing around the heads of jurors at the expense of the prior evidence." First up, Amber displaying contempt. Court TV spoke with body language expert Janine Driver to speak about all the small details that she noticed while watching the trial. When speaking about things that people at home might have missed, Driver said that Amber was displaying signs of contempt. Contempt is a pattern of attitudes and behavior, often towards an individual or group, but sometimes toward an ideology, which is the characteristics of disgust and anger. When talking about signs of contempt, Driver said, quote, "It's on the left side of her face right there. It's moral superiority, and it's out of place, especially for a battered woman. I work with battered women, they're not leaking contempt." The expert continued that signs of contempt were shown in other women like Casey Anthony and Jodi Arias, who the public were convinced did horrible acts and were hiding the truth. Driver continued, quote, "The bigger the audience, the more often we will see contempt, and we're seeing it every single day on Amber Heard's face, never once on Johnny Depp's face. Contempt is one of the 7 universal emotions that cannot be hidden on a person's face, so it's giving us a true window into what's happened in her mind." And at number 7, case unlikely to set precedent. UCLA law professor Eugene Volokh chimed in on if he believes the case will be interesting to First Amendment scholars. He stated that he doesn't believe it will make any noticeable impact on the law at large. Several experts believe this will not become a landmark case in the history of defamation law. It will mainly be remembered for its shocking revelations. Professor Volokh said, quote, "It seems like a pretty basic libel claim. It's all about the facts. I haven't seen anything that would actually affect the law." Johnny smiling in court. During the trial, we have seen Johnny smile or smirk during intense or uncomfortable moments. Expert Janine Driver explained how this can be tied back to the childhood abuse Johnny faced when he was younger, something Johnny testified about during the trial. When speaking about the science behind it, Driver said, quote, "When people feel weak or vulnerable or emasculated, they'll often smile in those moments," adding, quote, "It's a way to not let us see how much suffering they're in. It becomes a defense mechanism that people will use throughout their life. I'm sure Johnny Depp has been doing this for years. This smile right here is saying I'm uncomfortable." Halfway number 5, power dynamics might hurt Depp. Dr. Ziv Cohen, a psychiatrist and head physician, offered an opinion on the power dynamics in the court, stating that even though partners might be mutually responsible for violence, if there's another imbalance in the relationship, it can change the dynamics of the abuse. These power imbalances in the relationship can be due to strength, wealth, status, intelligence, etc. Cohen continues, quote, "It's possible that the more powerful person has vulnerabilities, such as emotional dependence on the partner, which would lead the more powerful person to be exploited." Dr. Cohen believes that Depp's charm in court might have gained sympathy from jurors, but his detrimental lifestyle habits could have a large effect. Dr. Cohen agreed, saying, quote, "The jurors may have been alienated by these unflattering elements of his personality and find it hard to accept that he was truly damaged by Heard, as opposed to behaving in a self-destructive manner for which he is now assigning blame." Amber Heard looks turtled. YouTube channel The Behavioral Arts did an entire video on some of the body language that's been displayed during the trial. When specifically talking about Amber, they claim that Amber looked, quote, "turtled" during the trial, like she was trying to draw less attention to herself and look smaller. The expert explains that this is a defense mechanism when people feel insecure. She also showcases stress in key areas of her chin and forehead. They also noticed that Amber was giving, quote, "non-answer" statements when testifying. When watching a portion of the trial, the host notes that Amber has shifty eyes when someone is talking to her. One reason for this could be a condescending lack of interest, with it signaling that the person who is speaking to her is not important enough. And at number 3, the break will help Amber. The explosive trial is on pause this week as the judge had a pre-scheduled conference that was incorporated into the schedule. This breakup could potentially help Amber Heard a lot, as the jury got to hear Amber Heard's testimony before the break, and the pause took place before Heard was able to be cross-examined, meaning her statements are ringing in the ears of the jurors, and Depp's team won't be able to pick her apart until next week. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savello said, quote, "That's the kind of thing lawyers worry about all the time, and sometimes you get bad luck. This is a significant break and people are going to marinate in it," Heard's testimony. Since Heard's testimony was so graphic and detailed, it's impossible that it wouldn't have sunk into the minds of the jury. Heard forgot key details while testifying. When Heard was describing some of the altercations she had with Johnny, the body language expert noted that Heard seemed to forget a lot of key details, including which parts of her body were specifically hurt when the bottle was allegedly thrown at her by Johnny. Heard was also fluttering her eyes, another deflection technique. The expert also emphasized that Heard minimizes some of her previously mentioned altercations to put further stress on others, trying to manipulate how things are being interpreted by listeners.